There is a sound that, when it shows up on a sonar readout off the coast of California, makes great white sharks do something almost nothing else on Earth can make them do. Not for an hour, not for a day. Researchers have tracked great white sharks fleeing an entire stretch of ocean for up to a year after a single encounter with this sound. We're talking about an animal that sits at the top of nearly every food chain it's ever been part of, an animal humans have spent decades being terrified of, and it disappears the moment this particular predator shows up. Today we're talking about that predator. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why marine biologists call the orca the wolf of the sea, why an apex predator capable of killing literally anything in the ocean has somehow never killed a human and why, very recently, scientists had to completely rewrite what they thought they knew about what an orca even is. Let's get into it. Here's how we're going to structure this. First, we're covering what actually makes an orca an apex predator in the most literal biological sense: the size, the speed, the brain. Then we're going deep on the hunting techniques, because this is where things get genuinely disturbing in the best possible way. After that, we're covering the social structure that makes orcas almost uniquely terrifying as a coordinated group. And we're closing with two of the strangest, most current orca stories in the world right now. A pair of orcas surgically hunting one of the ocean's other apex predators, and an entire population that has, for reasons nobody fully agrees on, started sinking boats. Stick around for that last one, because it's happening right now, and it has sailors changing their entire routes to avoid it. Part 1, the anatomy of total dominance. Let's start with the basic numbers, because they matter more than people realize. Adult orcas typically measure between 23 and 32 feet in length, with males reaching weights up to 6 tons and females approximately 4 tons. For context, that's heavier than a school bus. And size alone wouldn't mean much if they were slow. They're not. Orcas can cruise at roughly 9 miles per hour and burst up to about 34, 5 miles per hour when actually pursuing prey, fast enough that almost nothing in the ocean can simply outswim one once it's decided to commit to a chase. But speed and size are just the opening argument. Orcas are widely considered the most sophisticated predators in the sea, combining raw, physical power with genuine problem-solving intelligence and complex social coordination that rivals terrestrial apex predators like wolves and big cats. Except they're doing it in a fully three-dimensional aquatic environment, which is a dramatically harder problem to solve. Wolves coordinate on flat ground. Orcas coordinate in open water with no fixed reference points, chasing prey that can dive, breach, or scatter in any direction at once. And here's the detail that should genuinely unsettle you. Orca dominance in the ocean is so complete that great white sharks, themselves widely regarded as the ocean's most feared predator, have been documented abandoning their feeding grounds for up to an entire year after a single orca predation event in that area. Not because the orca ate every shark, because one demonstration of what an orca is capable of was enough to make an entire population of apex predators relocate. So how does an animal earn that level of fear from another apex predator? You have to understand how they actually hunt. The hunting techniques. This is where orcas stop being just big and fast and start becoming genuinely strategic. Orcas live in stable matrilineal pods and hunt cooperatively using techniques that are passed down through generations. And crucially, different populations have developed completely different hunting traditions, almost like distinct cultures, even though they're all the same species. Let's start with one of the most visually dramatic ones: wave washing. Pack ice killer whales are famous for this technique, which they use specifically to hunt Weddell seals resting on ice shelves. The process starts with reconnaissance. The orcas locate a seal hauled out on an ice floe by spy hopping, lifting their heads vertically out of the water to look around. Then, according to researchers who've documented this behavior, the matriarch of the pod actually coordinates the entire attack, calculating the precise angle and intensity needed to physically break the ice floe apart before the group works together to push the broken ice into open water, generate a second wave, and literally wash the seal directly off its floating platform and into the sea, at which point the seal has lost its only advantage, and the hunt is essentially over. Then there's carousel feeding, which is used by orcas hunting schooling fish like herring. Working together in pods, orcas herd fish into a tight swirling ball using coordinated movements that create currents the fish can't escape, making it dramatically easier to pick off multiple fish at once. Some populations have refined this even further. North Atlantic killer whales hunting herring will produce specific frequency calls precisely tuned to the herring's hearing range, deliberately using sound to frighten the fish into clustering into a tight defensive ball, then swim around them, flashing their white bellies to keep them pinned in place, using their own coloring as a kind of psychological tool against the prey's instincts. For larger, more dangerous prey, the strategy shifts entirely from confusion to patience. When mammal-eating orcas encounter a humpback whale mother traveling with her calf, they don't simply attack. They coordinate a strategy designed to minimize their own effort against an animal that can grow up to 17 meters long. The key to success is patience. They wait for the precise right opportunity to separate the calf and carry it off, mimicking the way the mother herself carries her calf in her slipstream, essentially tricking the baby whale's own instincts into cooperating with its abduction. And then there's the technique that's arguably the most physically aggressive. Dolphin hunting in the eastern tropical Pacific. Orcas there are known to launch themselves more than 6 meters out of the water specifically to body slam a dolphin in mid-air, stunning, injuring, or exhausting it to make the kill easier. A necessary tactic given how fast and agile dolphins are, which forces the orcas to work as a tightly coordinated unit to pull it off. One more, and this one is genuinely brutal in its method. Beaching hunts off the coast of Patagonia. These orcas have mastered using incoming waves to intentionally beach themselves on shore, specifically to grab elephant seal pups. Right before the attack, the entire group goes completely silent, stopping all vocal communication, while pod members who aren't participating in the hunt hang back specifically to observe and learn the technique. That's not instinct. That's a teaching moment, deliberately structured. And it doesn't stop at traditional prey. When commercial whaling collapsed large whale populations across the 20th century, some orca pods simply adapted, shifting their targeting to entirely different prey species and developing new techniques to match. More recently, researchers have documented orcas learning to exploit human fishing operations directly, a behavior called depredation, where orcas strip fish straight off commercial longlines. And this skill has spread between separate orca populations in what looks like genuine cultural transmission, rather than independent discovery. In other words, orcas are watching what humans do and learning from it. Part 3: The society behind the strategy. None of this works without the social structure underneath it. And this is honestly one of the most fascinating parts of orca biology. Orcas live in matrilineal pods led by a dominant female, often spanning multiple generations bound together by strong lifelong familial bonds, and cooperation defines nearly everything they do. Hunting together, protecting calves together, and navigating enormous oceanic territories as a unit. Here's the detail that genuinely surprises people. Female orcas can live past 80 years old, and they continue actively leading their pods well after menopause, making orcas one of only a small handful of species on Earth, alongside humans, where menopause is even biologically relevant in the first place. And this isn't just a biological curiosity. Research reaffirming what's called the grandmother hypothesis has found that older post-reproductive females act as living repositories of ecological knowledge, leading their pods to reliable salmon grounds, specifically during years when food is scarce. And a calf's survival is statistically linked to whether it has a living grandmother in the pod, because she actively shares food and guides the family group. An orca grandmother isn't sentimental set dressing. She's a functional survival resource for the entire pod, accumulated over decades of memory. That's also, by the way, part of why losing key individuals to environmental damage matters so much. Knowledge like that doesn't transfer instantly. It's built over a lifetime, and it can disappear with one animal. Part 4. The Surgeons of False Bay. Now we get into one of the strangest, most specific orca stories happening anywhere in the world, and it's still actively unfolding. Off the coast of South Africa, there are 2 adult male orcas that marine biologists have nicknamed Port and Starboard, named for their unusual, rare, collapsed dorsal fins, with Port's fin collapsing to the left and Starboard's collapsing to the right. Around 2015, things started washing up on South African beaches that didn't make sense. 7-gill shark carcasses began appearing with clean pectoral tears, and their livers completely missing, while every other organ remained untouched. A shark biologist named Alison Toner, who's been studying these waters for years, immediately recognized the pattern. Such near-surgical precision is the hallmark of this specific pair, who'd already been extracting livers from sharks since at least 2015. Then it escalated to the ocean's most feared predator. Great white sharks began washing ashore, starting in 2015, with nothing removed except their livers. Scientists had genuinely never documented orcas performing this kind of consistent surgical predation on sharks before. And researchers now suspect the pair may even be teaching the technique to other orcas, which would make it a genuine example of culture spreading through an animal population. The method itself sounds almost clinical. Researchers have documented the orcas ramming into a great white shark to physically flip it upside down, inducing a catatonic state called tonic immobility. Once the shark is helpless, the orcas grab its pectoral fins and violently shake it until the liver is exposed. And they target the liver specifically because, as researchers explain, shark livers are particularly energy-rich, consisting mainly of fats, and can make up to 1/3 of the shark's entire body weight. It's the single most calorie-dense meal available on that shark, extracted with surgical efficiency, and the rest of the carcass is left almost entirely alone. The body count is staggering for 2 animals. In 2017 alone, at least 7 great whites believed to be victims of the pair were discovered, including a well-known 16-foot female named Khaleesi, found washed ashore with her liver removed. By August 2019, 5 more deceased great whites were found with their livers missing. And in a single day in February of 2023, at least 17 broad-nosed 7-gill sharks were killed off Pearly Beach, every single one with its liver precisely removed. Then in 2023, the story took an even stranger turn. An orca nicknamed Starboard, due to his collapsed dorsal fin, was documented for the first time ever incapacitating and consuming an entire great white shark completely alone, in just 2 minutes. No pod, no backup, a solo kill against an animal most people would assume needs a coordinated group effort to take down, since male killer whales typically weigh around 13,000 pounds. And the great white in question weighed roughly 220 pounds. Researchers note it was still, in their words, a pretty one-sided fight. But the fact that a single orca chose to, and succeeded at hunting alone, was genuinely unprecedented. And the ripple effect on the broader ecosystem has been enormous. A research team documented 14 separate GPS-tagged great white sharks rapidly fleeing the area the moment orcas were sighted nearby. And since 2017, at least 9 great whites with their livers removed have washed ashore in one specific bay alone. One researcher described tracking an orca, flipping a massive great white completely upside down and biting directly into the liver region, and noted that this was something nobody in South Africa had ever seen before, because for decades the assumption was simply that white sharks were the apex predators, full stop. People struggled to even believe what was happening at first. Today, an area that was once internationally famous as one of the best places on Earth to observe great white sharks has seen its sightings collapse to nearly nothing. And the leading theory, even among scientists who disagree about exactly how much blame belongs to the orcas versus other factors like overfishing, is that the sharks have simply learned, generation after generation, to stay away. Part 5. The boats. And now for the story that might be the most genuinely bizarre orca behavior on the planet right now, because, unlike everything else in this video, It has absolutely nothing to do with hunting or eating, and nobody fully agrees on why it's happening. Starting in 2020, a specific subpopulation of orcas began ramming boats and attacking their rudders in the waters off the Iberian Peninsula, primarily targeting slow-moving, medium-sized sailboats around the Strait of Gibraltar and along the Portuguese, Moroccan, and Galician coastlines. This wasn't a one-off curiosity. By 2026, there had been over 500 reported interactions attributed to roughly 15 individual orcas, with the behavior clearly spreading between different pods over time. The attacks themselves follow an eerily consistent pattern. The orcas typically approach a vessel stealthily from the stern, then make contact through ramming, nudging, and biting, almost always focused specifically on the rudder. They've been observed using their heads to push the rudder or their bodies to create leverage, in some documented cases, spinning an entire boat almost 360 degrees. Inspections of damaged vessels have found orca toothrake marks along the bow, keel, and rudder, with the worst hit rudders found split in half, completely torn off, or bent at their mounting point. Some of these encounters have gone on for a genuinely long time. In one widely reported incident, killer whales rammed a single boat continuously for over an hour, eventually managing to tear the rudder off entirely, and the consequences have, on multiple occasions, been severe. On May 12, 2024, the Spanish yacht Albarán Cognac was attacked and holed in the Strait of Gibraltar, with both people aboard rescued by a passing tanker before the yacht sank. On July 26th of that same year, orcas attacked and sank the British sailing yacht Bonhomme William in a similar incident, with all 3 crew members rescued by Spanish Coast Guards. And on September 13, 2025, a tourist yacht carrying 5 people was repeatedly struck and sank near Fonte da Telha beach off the coast of Portugal. All 5 people were rescued after putting out a distress call. So, why is this happening? This is genuinely contested among the scientists studying it. One early theory that spread widely in the media was revenge, the idea that a specific orca, nicknamed White Gladys, suffered some kind of traumatic boat-related injury and was essentially teaching other orcas to retaliate against vessels. It's a compelling story, but Monica Whelan-Shields, director of the Orca Behavior Institute, has pushed back on that framing directly, arguing that targeted retaliation of that kind would be completely uncharacteristic of the species she spent years studying. Orcas are fully capable of attacking and killing an enormous range of species around them, yet they have never once turned that predatory capability toward humans, despite ample opportunity. The leading scientific explanation right now leans towards something far less sinister: play. According to Alfredo López Fernández, a researcher with the Atlantic Orca Working Group who has been monitoring these whales for years, the prevailing theory is that the behavior functions essentially as a fad that has spread through social learning. Not unlike, researchers have pointed out elsewhere, the brief and bizarre trend decades ago of Pacific orcas wearing dead salmon on their heads, a behavior that spread for a while, purely because other orcas saw it and copied it, then eventually just stopped. Here's the detail that should reassure you more than anything else in this section. Researchers studying the behavior have pointed out that sinking the boats does not appear to be the actual goal at all, given that the vast majority of attacked vessels survive. One researcher noted that this specific group of orcas could likely have sunk as many as 600 boats by now if that had genuinely been their intention. And critically, no human has ever been killed by a wild orca. The people aboard these boats are consistently left alone, even during hours-long encounters. Whatever's driving this, frustration with the noise of an engine, an evolving cultural fad, practice for hunting techniques used against large prey like tuna, it is not, by any available evidence, aggression directed at the humans on board. That hasn't stopped it from reshaping how people sail an entire region of ocean. Encountering orcas has effectively become a standard part of route planning for any yacht transiting the Iberian Peninsula now, with dedicated tracking websites, Facebook groups, and even government-published guidance documents on what to do if a pod approaches your boat. An entire category of maritime travel now has to plan around the behavioral whims of an animal that, by every account, isn't even trying to hurt anyone. So here's where that leaves us. An animal large enough and fast enough to outrun almost anything in the ocean, smart enough to teach wave washing, surgical shark dissection, and rudder-snapping fads to its own children, social enough to keep elderly, post-reproductive grandmothers in positions of genuine survival-critical leadership for decades. And, despite every single one of those capabilities, an animal that has, as far as we know, never once used any of it to deliberately kill a human being in the wild. That's not an accident, and it's not luck. It's a predator that has spent millions of years refining exactly what it chooses to hunt, exactly how it teaches its young to hunt it, and, reasons we still don't fully understand, exactly what it chooses not to. The entire ocean has very good reasons to be afraid of orcas. We, for whatever reason, mostly don't need to be. If this kind of deep dive into the natural world is something you want more of, make sure you're subscribed, because there's a lot more where this came from.